There are many different ways to use text, especially multi-line text. The method you use will depend on your needs. Styles will control your font type. Let them. MText objects can be edited within the text editor, but once you do, you lose some editing abilities. Let's open up and insert some text, and I'll show you how. If you start the MText command, pick a box anywhere, it doesn't really matter. Then right-click inside the box. Now you want the Import Text option. Browse to the folder where we're working. And insert the note-pipe.txt file. With this import option, you can import a TXT file, something that someone has already typed up and saved as a TXT file. It's raw data, it's just the text, it's not formatted. Autocad can insert that and put it right into your text object. Once done, just click right outside there. This is a note. It's a bit of a humorous piping note that you may want to take a look at. Some of it's quite funny. But let's copy this text object. That way we'll have the original still intact and we can mess with this one and I can show you some things you can do with it. So for example here, if I change the font type inside the editor for this part of the note, or if I change the color, I can do that. But now I have problems with the text style. If I use the match properties, I can't change the style. But watch as I take an unaltered text object, and if I change its style, now we see here this style is set to annotative. This style is set to standard. This one is still set to standard. So if I start the match properties command, say I want everything to look like this one, I pick these two. Well, this is now set to standard. This one is set to standard. And this one is set to standard. But that part that's red in a different font, I can't put it back to normal. If I double click the text and I want to override these settings, I can't. I have to come down here to this remove formatting, say remove all, and then I can come and make my changes. So you have to be careful with it. It makes things difficult, but you can do it. You'll have to go to a few extremes or a few extra steps to fix it. So just be careful with that. MText can also have a background mask applied to it. We looked over that briefly, and we found out a way on how to mask it. I want to demonstrate that to you again. The quickest and easiest way to do that is to just keep your Properties palette open. Select the text and go to Background Mask. Now, you can also activate the editor in here and go to the Background Mask and get your settings this way. We'll use the background color for an example here. If you use the drawing background color, you don't get to change the color. So I can click on it and it won't do anything. It'll just stay where it was before, but it won't be red. Okay, as you can kind of see here, the background is grayed out. You can't see anything. So if I move this text over the top of this text, and if I make sure it is on top with my draw order, this text is blocked out. So you can kind of see that line right there. The text is there, it hasn't been changed, hasn't been deleted. And if I pick it, it pops up. But when I go to print, this is what it will look like. So that's a great method to use to keep your text visible, especially in a very busy drawing. So if you double click in here, and you can see a spelling error is made. If you right click, you have different options or suggestions available. Maybe you meant popular. If not, just undo. You can find some more suggestions here. Or if it is a word and it is spelled correctly, you can click Add to Dictionary right here, or you can just ignore it altogether. This is a great way to make sure that you're spelling things correctly. You can also use the spell command. It's found right here in the ribbon, or you can just type in the word spell. This will work a couple of different ways. You can look in the entire drawing, the current space, or you can select objects. If you just want to select objects, you can pick this box right here. You can pick 1 or 2 or as many different text objects as you would like. And it works for dimensions, multi-leaders, single line text, and multi-line text. Once you've selected everything, click Start. It'll do a scan. It'll find the word, it'll zoom right to it and give you some suggestions. And if the suggestions are wrong, you can just type it in right here, whatever it needs to be. And at every instance that this misspelling is found in your selection set, it will change all of them at once or just one at a time, or you can ignore them all. So those are some advanced editing techniques and tools that you can use when working with multi-line text. If you need to hide line work in your drawing, you can try using what's called a wipeout. The wipeout command creates a wipeout object. This type of object hides what's behind it. Let's open up the annotation drawing. Here we have some line work. On this page we have some notes and some dimensions. Let's just go to the blank page. All right, let's say that we need to hide some things, a few chairs or the doorway or something. Well, we can create a wipeout. Just type in the word wipeout to start the command, or come to the markup panel on the Annotate tab on the ribbon and click Wipeout. You pick your first point, your second point, and it's making a polygon. You can make it any shape you want. Once you're finished, press Enter. And there you go. It's its own object. You can see it here in the Properties tool palette. And it's essentially it. It creates an object that blocks everything behind it. So now I can put in text. Or whatever I need to. If you have a closed polygon of any shape, could be a polyline, you can convert it to a wipeout frame. Just start the wipeout command, then type P for polyline. Then select it. You can pick to either erase or not erase the polyline. I say erase it, otherwise your polyline is going to be there, and you'll have to deal with that. And there you go. This is a way to block out text or line work or something that you don't want to see. Now that we have our wipeouts, and you can delete the polyline when you create it, or you can leave it there. And we also see here that there's a frame that's around it. Start the wipeout command again. There are two options, frames and polyline. The polyline we used already. We selected a polyline that's closed to use as the definition for our wipeout frame. Frames, we'll turn them off or on. You have three settings, on, off, or display but not plot. If you turn it on, this is the way it looks. And when you print your drawing, it's going to have this outline on your drawing. If that's okay with you, then go ahead and do it. If you start the wipeout command again, go to Frames and click Off. This is exactly what the drawing is going to look like when you print it out. The problem with this is that you don't know it's here. You can't really hover over it to find it, but you can do a crossing window to find it. But if you were to open up this drawing just the way it is, say that one wasn't there, you would really not have any idea that there was a wipeout there at all until you used a crossing window to find it. So that can get you into some trouble, so be careful with that. The other setting for frames for the wipeouts that you have is display but not plot. This will show you the frame, This will let you know there's a wipeout there, but it won't print out. That's pretty useful. If you're going to use wipeouts, I suggest that you use the frame setting, what's called a set to 2, or display without printing. You can type in wipeout frame, and you can get to this system variable that controls that. Right now it's set to 2. If you set it to 0, that's off. Set it to 1 is on, but will plot. Set to 2 will be on, but won't plot. So just keep these things in mind. If you want to mask an area behind the text or block it out, I suggest that you use the background mask. Click Use Background Mask, set the setting to something about 1.1, and use the drawing background color. That will mask the text, but it won't create another object that you have to worry about and have to maintain. Because if I do something like this, my wipeout might be in the wrong place. Here's the text. You may have to use what's called a draw order. Type in DR, press Enter, and then click Front. That will bring it sort of to the top of the list. Anything else is behind it or below it. Doesn't change in actual elevation or anything. It just moves things backwards, sort of like layering a stack of paper. So if you have the wipeout, you'll have to make sure you're aware that it's there, and it will have to be maintained. I've seen a lot of drawings that have had holes in them when printed that nobody could explain until we set the wipeout frames to 1 or 2, and then we saw it and we're like, oh, there's a wipeout there. So just be careful and be cautious, but they can be very useful. Styles control everything in Autocad. Text styles are no different. They are actually very simple to create and edit. Let's open up a file that has some text in it. Let's look at the dimension example file. Now go over to the Styles tab. This dimension style uses a text style for the text. The text style it's using is called standard. Now we have 4 different styles in this drawing. They all look a little bit different, or are different in some way. Different size, different color. It could be a lot of different ways or reasons that you would want to make a different text style. Your text styles can be edited right here. Go to the Annotate tab on the ribbon on the text panel. Click on the text style flyout arrow, or just type in the word style on the command line. Text styles were one of the very first styles added in Autocad. That's why when you type in style, it opens up the text style manager. Text styles are much less complicated than dimension styles. This is it. There's only one window here. You select the text style that you want to change or edit, and you do. You can also create a new one. Let's make a new one. We'll just call it Style 1. Click OK. Now we have a list of fonts that we can use. You can use all of these or any of them. Let's go with Verdana. Now a lot of times, but not always, you'll have font style settings here. Bold, bold italic, italic, or regular. There's a bold italic. Let's just go bold. Now you can make your text annotative or not. An annotative text style object means that if the text is in model space, then it will automatically be scaled up to a specific paper text height, regardless of the scale that you're viewing at. And what that means is that you can put in your text and you say, no matter what scale this drawing is printed at, or a view or whatever, I always want the text to be, so many units tall. So in this case, this one is set to 0.2 units in height. So if that is in inches, then it's 0.2 of an inch, or if it's in feet, it's 0.2 of a foot, etc. Or you can just turn that off and have it default to that size no matter what the scale is. So in a different, larger scale, then it's going to be, smaller. But in a zoomed in scale, it's going to be larger when it prints. That's up to you. I like using the annotative text, especially when I put my text in model space. But typically, I will put my text in paper space. That way I don't have to worry about the scale. I don't have to worry about it showing up in other views, etc. If you do set this without a height, I suggest you leave this at 0. That way, it will use the default height, and your text objects won't be changed according to style. Or you can make text styles based on text height. So if you have a title or a header, you might want that to be a little bit bigger. If so, then there you go. So you'll see here that this title here is set to 0.2, but the standard is set to 0. My notes are set to 0.1, and the annotative here, this is the default text style that comes with Autocad in most of the template files. So it depends on how you want to use it, on what you want to do. Now the width factor will literally scale the width of the text. A 1.0 means it's not scaling it. If I go less, it scrunches them in. If I go greater than 1, it's doubling it. The oblique angle is kind of like italicizing your text. Put it at a 15 degree, see it kind of slightly bends it, or it's at an angle. So you use what you want to use. Click Apply, Set Current, and now whenever we go with text, this is what we're going to use. So if I create multi-text, there you go. It's a little big, it's a little thick, and it's slanted. That's a great text style to use for a header or a title to a drawing or to a view. Text styles, as with all styles, are saved in the drawing. They're not saved on your computer or on a network where anyone can get to them. So if you create a style that you want to use in other drawings, you must import that style. I recommend that you create a standard set of text styles in your template file somewhere and start all of your new drawings from that template file. If you copy and then paste text or insert text into a drawing, and that text object style is not in the drawing, then the style is going to come with it. The same thing is going to happen with dimensions and multileaders. When this is done, AutoCAD looks for a text style of the same name, just as the one that you're importing. If it's found in that file already, then that's the one it's going to use. If not, it's going to bring the style with it. So be careful when naming your text styles. The same thing with your dimension styles and your multileader styles, your table styles, all of your styles. Because if you use text or drawings from other companies, you may want to make sure that your text styles and dimension styles don't have the same name. Because this is what's going to happen. If you have a text style just called text, and then you get a drawing from someone else and their name of their text style is also called text. If I import my drawing into theirs or theirs into mine, it's going to use the style that's already there. So I can make a text style that has something really big and obliqued, and widened out like this one. But if I import this text into another drawing that has a style called style 1, it's going to take on those properties and just completely disregard mine. So be careful with that. Here's my suggestion. Whenever you make a style, and if it's a text style or a dimension style, either one, you can come up to it, rename it, and at the very beginning, put your initials, your company name, something that's more unique. That way, my BCB, which are my initials, style 1, will always be BCB style 1. So anything that I do that's special like that, everyone's going to know about it. It won't be overridden. And if you use something called standard, all AutoCAD template files come with a text style in it called standard. Good chances are that someone else's drawing will too. And you might not want your specialized text showing up like theirs. So keep that in mind. Give it a unique name, set it up, and then use it. Tables in AutoCAD can be generated very quickly. They create a spreadsheet-like grid of lines and text. Tables have styles too. First, let's take a quick look at tables. You can create a table from an existing spreadsheet or from scratch. Just type the word table on the command line, or you can go to the table panel on the Annotate tab in the ribbon and click the Table button. They're fairly straightforward, though it looks like it could be a bit complicated, and you can make them more complicated. You have different styles. This drawing only has one called Standard, and you can start from an empty table or from some data link that we're not going to really get into now, but it will automatically extract data found in your file and put it into the table, which can be very handy. But to set up a table, you pick your style, you pick your insertion point, or you tell it that you're going to, and you define how many rows and how many columns that you're going to have. You can just click on the arrows or you can type it in. Let's go 4 rows, 5 columns. Now you have 3 different types of settings: a title, a header, or a data field. If you look at this little preview over here, this is what it's going to look like, though it doesn't give you a preview with the right number of columns and rows. I'm not sure why, but that's just what it does. But this is what it's going to look like. So you have your first row here, which is going to be the title. Then you have a header row. Then you have the number of rows that you define here is 1, 2, 3, and 4. I can switch any of these into a data type, a header type, or a title type. It's up to you. Typically, the style that you're going to need is going to be a title, and then a header, and then data. Sometimes you won't need the headers, you'll just need data, or sometimes you won't need the title, you'll just need a header like this. Again, it's only going to matter what you need. Click OK, pick your point, and there's your table. It seems simple enough, right? Now you just have to enter in the information you want to put inside each cell. So we can call this column 1, press the tab key, column 2, tab key, and it keeps going on. You can use your arrow keys to move around in each cell, or you can pick with your mouse which cell you want to edit. Now the different cells have different properties. You can lock them, you can lock just the content, you can lock just the formatting, or you can lock both of them. Once the cell has been locked in either category, then another person cannot change them unless they come up to it and unlock it, which is very nice. It keeps accidents from happening. You can change your text just like a regular text editor, and when you double click in the cell, you get the text editor ribbon come up, and you can just edit it like you would normal text. You can change your justification, and that changes it in the cell. And you can do this in more than one at a time as well. You can also do it in your properties panel. So if I pick all of these cells, I pick one box, hold down the Shift key, and now I have selected all of these boxes. And I can change different styles, cell height, cell width, alignments, and then they'll all match all at the same time. I can even put in background fills, which could be very handy when you're trying to stylize your drawing. I can change the border colors if I click on the border here. You can also right click and get to most of these options as well. So if I pick a color, let's say blue, you see the preview here, that's what's going on. I click OK, press Escape, and now I've changed the color. So you can do a lot with these to stylize them. If you want to change the width or the height, you just grip edit. I can change one column. I can change everything at once globally. If I click here, once I've stretched it, I can go into columns just like in multi-line text, or I can stretch it back down. If you select the table anywhere, you can pick up in the column, and I can make changes just to the column this way. I can grip edit it. I can change the formatting of the entire column. And in the same manner, you can do that sort of thing for a row. One of the nice things about tables in AutoCAD is that in the same way that the text editor works like a word processor, tables in AutoCAD work like a spreadsheet. So you can add some basic formulas, not a lot, just some of the basic ones that you're going to want. A sum, average, count. You can get information from one cell and add it to another. You can make an equation or formula, which is very cool. You can right click and you can insert rows above or below. You can delete a row. You can look for recent input, or you can change the data style. So if I'm in this row here, I can change it. Cell style is now a title. So it makes the text in there a little bit bigger, a little bit more bold. And that's really all that the styling does. So if you want to create other styles of tables, you can. Just make new, give it a name, hit continue, and now you can define a bit of information. you have your data header or title, or you can even create a new cell style. So you can take your title, give it a bigger margin, make it of a different type, change the format a little bit from a general to percentage to currency to a date, etc. So a good type you might want to make would be like a date style. You can change the text style here, the height, the color, and you can make or define how you want the borders to look. The header and the data work the same way, they just have their own presets already put in. Once you've created all of this, you can also make your table go up or down. But once you've created all this, you save your style, and now you have a different one to choose from. So if you need to make like a bill of materials or a drawing sheet list or any type of chart, and you're going to use it over and over again, create a style. That way, when you start your table, you'll have it already set up. You just have to put in the number of rows, columns, and the actual data that's going to go into it. Using Autocad is about using commands that help you do repetitive things very quickly. It reduces the amount of work you have to do to produce your drawings, and that's the whole point. One of those commands is the hatch command. Let's open up the dimension example file. Now go to the Model tab. It's all the way here on the left. Now we're in Model space. And let's say that we needed to shade in some of the areas on our drawing here for our item that we've created, and we need to show them in a specific way. We want to highlight the holes and highlight the area inside here. We would use a hatch command for that. Well, let's get these center lines out of the way. Go to the Home tab on the ribbon. On the Layer panel, let's use the Freeze option. Pick it. Now pick right there to get rid of those center lines. Press Enter. That's going to get everything out of our way. Well, let's start by using the hatch command. If you go to the Home tab on the ribbon, then to the Draw panel, the hatch command is right here. There are 3 different types of hatches that you can kind of create. A hatch, which is a series of different lines in a pattern. A gradient fill, but it has the exact same properties of a hatch. Or a boundary. The boundary doesn't put that pattern inside, but it creates the boundary like you would with the hatch. So it just creates the closed area, but not what goes inside it. But it works the same way in creating a hatch pattern, only it just doesn't. So if you have a series of lines and you need to make a closed area, the boundary is a good way to do it. So what you want to do when you start the hatch command is just pick it. And then the contextual ribbon tab for the hatch creation tool will come up. This is what it is. In a contextual ribbon tab, you've probably noticed, you've seen them in use several different times. The hatch creation tab is one, the text editing tab is another one, dimension styles tab, etc. A contextual ribbon tab is one that just pops up in a certain context. It's only there when you need it. So it's going to be real simple here to create this hatch pattern. Just pick a point inside this circle. Press Enter, and there's your hatch pattern. It's ugly, isn't it? It's not what you wanted, is it? No. But if you zoom in really far, you can see that it does have a hatch pattern to it. Well, we need to change this. There are a lot of different ways to do that. If you select an existing hatch pattern, that will bring up another contextual ribbon tab called the Hatch Editor. And it looks just like the hatch creation tool. The problem here is that our scale for the hatch pattern is way too small. So you come here, and you just type in a new number. Still not enough? There we go. So when you go higher for the scale, it spaces the lines farther apart, makes it bigger. But if I go below 1, it makes them even tighter. They get closer together. So this almost looks like a solid fill, even though it's not, though it would print that way. Some other things you can edit are the angle. Just click on the slider bar and drag it back and forth, or type in the angle you want it to be at. A 45-degree angle of a 45-degree angled line means it's going to go straight up at 90 degrees. An angle of 0 will put it back to where it normally is. And you can also make a hatch transparent. Sort of fades it back a little bit. And that's again with the slider bar right here. You can change the pattern, the color, or you can even put in a background fill. Once you're all finished, just click on the Close Hatch Editor button on the right. And there you go. So we have a hatch pattern that's white. It'll put white lines, or it'll put black lines on white paper, in this cyan background color. If we select it again, let's kind of ease that back a little bit with the transparency. Close the hatch editor, and there you go. So now we've kind of made our circle. But in this kind of a thing here, it makes this cross section look like that is the steel or the material, and then the rest of this bracket here is the hole. Well, let's just delete that. Start the hatch command again. You can type in the word hatch and pick your point. Let's try a different pattern. If you click on this little down arrow right here, you get this graphic interface of all sorts of different patterns that you could possibly use. There are a lot of them. These brick work great when you want to create the side of a brick house. You also have herringbone patterns, crosses, sand, several different bricks, and all sorts of different patterns. You even have some gradient fills. These could give you a really cool effect on a lake or on the side of a building or in any different way. Here's some gravel. Or you can even just go with a solid fill. That's up to you. Again, it depends on what you're trying to show, what you're trying to do, and what your needs are. There are a couple of different ways to create your hatch pattern. You can, by default, just pick inside an area, or you can select a closed object, like this circle. In a lot of cases, it's going to have the exact same effect, but not always. It just depends. Like this blue line for the outline of our bracket here is not one single closed item, so I can't select it. I have to use the pick area. I can pick my points here, or I can select my area that way. Now, if I have a hatch object that's a little bit different, let's say it's blue, and my angle completely different. There we go. I can do a couple of different things. I can do a match properties and change it that way, which is a really nice thing to do. And that's something I do often myself. I'll create a hatch pattern and I won't know what layer I'm on or what I want it to be, but I know I want it to match another hatch object that's in my drawing. So I'll use the match properties. Another thing you can do is when you start the hatch command is to pick on the match properties button right here. Say, I want this hatch pattern to be drawn like this one. So now when I pick my point in here, it automatically matches. That can save you some time too. And you don't have to go into another command. It's all done within the same command. If you want to edit your hatch pattern, you can in a couple of different ways. If I have a line here, and I use the trim command, pick my cutting edge, I can pick my hatch pattern. It'll trim it according to that line. Now, if you select a hatch pattern, you'll get an outline with grips. Now, these grips can be grip edited. If I hover over it, I can stretch that vertex point, which means I can move it to over here. Turn my O snaps on, and I can snap right to that point. I can remove that vertex altogether, or I can add another vertex. This is very handy and very useful when you want to edit hatch patterns. Now let's say you needed something converted to an arc. You can. Just click the Convert to Arc option, and it makes that an arc. If it's an arc, there's a Convert to Line. It'll keep the two nearest vertex points and just create a new circle here. So wherever you put it, it's going to go from these 2 points and through your new point. That's simple enough. If you have hatch and you want a boundary to show up, just select that hatch, the editor comes up, and then pick the Recreate Boundary. It'll ask you what you want it to do, be a region or polyline. If you want it to be associated with it, say yes in this case, press Enter, and it draws the line in there for you. Now this line is associated to the hatch pattern. So if I edit this line, the hatch pattern will be edited as well. I can delete the line though, and the hatch pattern remains. Undo that. And if I delete the hatch pattern, the polyline remains. So if you need to create a polyline around a big area, create a hatch and then recreate the boundary. It's a very useful trick that you can use to create boundaries for areas. Okay, great. Now we've seen how to create some line work, how to edit the line work, how to control some things visually between layers and styles. And we've also seen how to create annotations. Let's continue on with our chapter project here. We're going to start with the chapter project from our layer chapter, chapter 9, and we're going to build on top of that file. I've put a copy of it here of what I've done in the chapter 10 subfolder. It's called Project Template. Let's open that up. This will get us started. So remember, annotations will make or break your drawing, especially when construction is involved. Many people that you make drawings for do not know how to read drawings. So that may sound surprising to you, but you're going to find out it's often the case. In this chapter project, we're going to set up the dimension styles and the text styles for a later project. Again, open up the chapter project file from chapter 9 and let's work on this. What we're going to do is to make 3 text styles, one for notes, one for a header, and one for a title. Now you can be anywhere in your file for this right now. So go to the Annotate tab and let's check and see what we have here. We have a Roman and a standard. Okay, well, that doesn't fit our needs. What we need is something different. So let's create 3 different text styles. So we're going to make a notes style. So pick the new button, call it notes, and click OK. Now we've created it. Now you may have noticed that it matches in setup of what the current text style was, or the one that we had selected when we said make a new one. It copies the active one, but that's okay because a lot of times that's exactly what you want and you just want to tweak it a little bit. So we want to set the text height to 1/8 of an inch. So just come in here and literally put in 1/8, and we want the font to be Arial, which it already is, which is fantastic. Keep it regular, width factor of 1, oblique angle of 0. That's fantastic, and hit set current. And then I'll say, hey, look, you've changed this style since you've last done this. Do you really want to or not? Yes, I do. That's great. Now let's make another one. Click new and type in header. Click OK. And now on this, we want it to be Arial, but we want it to be bold. So let's make it bold. And we want the height to be a little bit bigger. So we'll go from 1/8 to 3/16. Okay. Now let's make another one. So yes, we want to save that. And this time we're going to call it title. Click OK. And that's going to be an Arial, bold, and we're going to make that 1/4 of an inch. Some really big text here because it's our title text. Set current. Actually, let's make our notes style current and then click close. So now automatically our text style that's going to happen is going to be called notes. That's great. Now let's make some dimension styles that are going to be suitable for an architectural drawing measured in feet and inches. Let's go to the dimension tab on the Annotate tab in the ribbon. Click the flyout arrow, and we only have the one style here. Now we're going to make a new style, say new, and we're going to call it architectural project. And we're going to start with the standard style because that's all we have available to us. Click continue. Now we need to make some changes. In the lines tab, let's make everything by layer. Same thing with the extension lines. Okay, now let's change the extend beyond ticks to 0. We'll keep that the same. Now this is going to be an architectural drawing, so we need to look at the text tab and the symbols and arrows tabs. Now we're going to use architectural tick. That's good. Now our leader is going to be a closed arrowhead, which is what we want. Everything else here appears to be what we want. So let's go to the text tab Now, I know you're saying, well, how do I know what I want? That's a great question. And if you really did ask that, I'm glad you did. Well, I'm giving you the design standard. I'm saying this is how we want it to be presented. Because there are so many different settings in here, you can set it up a million different ways, and you really have no idea until you've done it for a while and you've seen, hey, I like how this looks, and we're going to keep it that way. All right, that's what I'm going to use. Now, you can also find out that, hey, you know what, I need to tweak this drawing just a little bit, and that's okay to do. I suggest if you want to tweak a customized style, then you copy it, give it a name, and say, hey, it's based on this default style, but it's just a little bit different. Maybe it's normal-bold or normal-italicized or something else. But that will help you know that, yeah, you've tweaked it, it's special, and that it's okay to copy and paste it around. It's not going to override any other type of dimension styles at all. So here in the text tab, let's set our style to notes for the text, and our text color to by layer. No fill color, we're not going to fill it in from behind. We're just going to leave everything else to be the same. And that's it. Just a few tweaks here to the dimension style and set up a couple of note styles, but that's it. And now that we have these things set up, we can start any project with this file. And we know that our notes, our text, our dimensions, they're all going to work out the way we want them to. That's why you make a template file, so you don't have to go in and set up your dimensions every time. Now that you're done, go ahead and save your file. One reason CAD programs are superior in efficiency to hand drawings is their ability to reproduce line work rapidly. Most designs have line work that is repeated, especially in architectural design. If an architect wants to design an office building, why would they draw and redraw the same chair, sink, window, door, etc.? While in CAD, all you have to do is copy it. Well, that's where the use of blocks come in. If you go to the Chapter 11 folder for the projects, open up the annotation drawing. We've used this drawing a couple of times, and it's going to look real familiar to you here now. But if you open this up, you'll see some examples of blocks. These chairs are blocks, these plants are blocks, these doors and the windows are all blocks. Blocks are a group of objects that are combined to form one object. Each part is still intact and can be manipulated, but only in the block editor. If you go to the Model tab here of this drawing, you can see here, when I pick this, I don't have the individual lines. I have one object, and I can move it around, I can rotate it, I can copy it, paste it, etc. In the case of these doors, I can do even more than that. They're dynamic blocks. I can close the door. I can set it at a 45-degree angle. I can flip it. I can make it larger or smaller. I can do a whole bunch of things to it. That's a dynamic block. In all cases, though, and on all types of blocks, each part is intact and can be manipulated. This allows for custom shapes and designs to be made and to act as one object. So if this chair wasn't a block, then we would have to grab every little bit of it in order to move it or to copy it or to edit it or anything. So it takes all of these parts and adds them together to make one chair. Blocks can be made out of any Autocad object. This chair here is made up of arcs and ellipses. When I pick it, it acts like it's just one chair. Here I have a grip, which is the insertion point. Every block has an insertion point. It's a point of reference for the block. The objects in a block can be created on any layer inside the block. If they're drawn on layer 0 and drawn to by layer, then they'll take on the properties of the layer that the block is inserted on. That gives you a lot of flexibility and a lot of freedom. This chair is on the chair layer. If I switch it to the door layer, nothing happens. Why is that? Well, if I select a block and I right-click on it, I can go to the block editor. If I pick the block editor button, this puts me in a special mode in AutoCAD where I've isolated just the line work for this block. You see, there's nothing else around here. The insertion point for a block is at the coordinate 0, 0. And I get a special block authoring palettes palette here. This lets you control the line work to create dynamic blocks. We're not going to talk about those right now. They're a bit complicated. Right now, I just want to show you Block Basics 101. But right now, let me move this out of the way. We can see that this chair is drawn on the chair layer. So that means that every time I draw or copy or insert this chair block, it's always going to look magenta. So let's change that. I'll select all of the objects here in the block, switch it from layer chair to layer 0. Say, well, now it's always going to be black or white depending on the background. That's not the case. Let's close the block editor and we're going to save the changes to chair. This one's yellow. Why is that? Because it's on the door layer. Why this chair is on the chair layer. I can use the match properties and then make them all yellow because I've changed their layer. So, well, I don't want them on the door layer. I want them on the plant layer. Now they're all red. So you can see you can do a lot of things with blocks very quickly. Or, in fact, I can go to the chair layer and I can change its color to blue. And now the chairs are all blue. That's the power of blocks. You can't do that on a board drawing. So make sure that when you draw with blocks, that you draw them all on layer 0. And then once you insert the block, you put the block on the layer you want it to be on. That way I can have two types of chairs. Let's say I have a chair layer, which I do. These are for my new chairs. Now let's say I have old chairs. We'll call this layer chair to be removed. And we're going to make it a different color. Let's say gray. And we're going to make the line type dashed, or let's go hidden. So let's say I have chairs that I need to get rid of. Say this row here. I can set their layer to chairs to be removed. And everything else is on the chair layer. So now when I go to my drawing, I can see that these chairs are a lighter color than this, and I need to do something with them. They're not highlighted like these new chairs are. Of course, then I can label them with a multileader or with some text and say, these chairs are to be removed. These are all new chairs. So you can do things like that with your layer manager, with your different layers and with blocks, and you can do them very quickly. It's a good practice to create a block library somewhere where you can keep and organize all of your blocks so that you can use them in the future. Put them on your network somewhere where you can get to them and where anyone else can get to them as well. Save them in the cloud on Autodesk 360. That way you'll always have them available for you when you want to use them. But make the blocks and make sure you can use them somewhere else. And I'll show you how to do that in another section. There are many ways to create blocks in AutoCAD. Any drawing can be even used as a block, so you can start a new file and draw a block there. Later, you can insert that file with the insert command. Now it's a block in your drawing. Or you can combine objects in your current file to make a block inside it. Then you can export that as a block or as a file to be used later on. If you start with a blank file, like I have right here. If not, you can type in the word new, click acad.dwt for the template, and pick open. Now, let's start a new block here. We're going to draw a chair. We want to keep it simple. So let's use some rectangles. So let's save this file before we get started. Let's call it chair. I started a file here already, but I'm going to overwrite it. Call it chair. In my case, I want to replace it, but if you have a brand new file, then you won't have that option. It'll just start the file. Okay, now we have a blank file. Let's check our units. Let's go to architectural and inches. Click OK. Now we want to create a very simple chair. Let's do that. Let's use rectangles. Type in REC. Pick a point anywhere right now. Let's make it 2 feet tab by 2 feet. Enter. That's a basic chair. Now it needs a back. We'll draw another rectangle. Snap here. And let's make it 2 inches wide. Let's draw another rectangle for the back. and we'll put it in right about here. Anywhere is good. There we go. That's a basic chair. Save the file again, and there you go. You just made a block. Now, if you wanted to create that same block, but keep it inside your file, you need to use the block command. Otherwise, this file alone, all by itself, can be used as a block in another drawing, and I'll show you how to do that with the insert command. But if you want to make a block inside your drawing itself, you just type the word block on the command line, press enter, give it a name. Let's call this chair. Pick a base point. Now that can be anywhere. Just think about it for a minute though. When I insert this block, what do I want its reference point to be? I mean, where do I want it all to be based off of? It can be right in the middle of the chair. It can be in a corner. It can be in the middle of the back, middle of the front. It doesn't matter. And you can always change that later. I'm going to pick the midpoint of the back. Okay, now we've established the insertion point of the block. I'm going to select the objects. This rectangle and that one. Once you've picked everything, press enter. Here you get a little preview of what it's going to be. And now you can set up some behavior. You can allow them to be exploded, which is probably an okay thing in this case, but you don't have to do that. We'll talk about exploding later on. Give it a little description here. This is a chair. Block units are okay. Okay. Now when I pick this object, you see it's now a block. There you go. You've created a block and you can insert this, you can copy it, you can mass produce it very quickly. That's all there is to it. Draw your line work, select it, and then have at it. If you want to export a block that you've created in your file and save it somewhere, you have a couple of choices. You can pick from a list of the blocks in a current file, or you can create one from scratch or whatever. But first you want to start with the command called wblock. Press enter. Now you can create a block right here, or you can export the entire drawing. This is essentially going to copy the file, or you can pick from a block that's already in your drawing. We have one right here. Just click down on the arrow. It'll give you a list of the blocks. That's chair. And now you pick where you want it to go and your insert units. Well, we drew it in inches, so we want to keep it in inches. Let's find a pathway for it. You can save it to your cloud, and I'm going to call it chair. Click OK, and there you go. You just exported a block. Now it's available for you to use in any other drawing that you want. A good practice to follow when creating blocks is to make sure you draw its contents on layer 0. We talked about this in the previous section, but I want to remind that to you again. When a block's contents are on layer 0, they will take on the properties of the layer they are inserted on. That allows the creator of that drawing to be able to use this block in any way that they want to. They can make it dark, they can make it thin, they can make it dashed line work, continuous line work, etc. But if you commit to them a set of layers, they can't change that block en masse especially, or quickly, or they can't even change the block individually. They're stuck. They have to go into the block editor, change your block so that they can have the opportunity to change it on the fly. So always draw your blocks on layer 0. Make them by layer. It will save you time and effort in the end. Plus, you'll be able to use the same block in many different ways in the same drawing. Having blocks and making them are the first steps in using blocks. The next step will be inserting them into your drawing. To do this, use the insert command. Pick the block that you want to use from the current file. If it's not here or you don't have any, then you have to browse to the folder where the file is located. Just click on the Browse button, find your folder, pick the block, click Open, and then you have a few options. Now you can also insert any DWG file as a block. In fact, a block that's been saved externally or been imported out of a file is just saved as a .dwg file. AutoCAD doesn't see them as being different. And a block is essentially a DWG file that's been saved inside another DWG file. So they go hand in hand. Now, the insert window here allows you to do a few things to your block upon inserting it. You can give it a specific coordinate to insert into, or you can just pick it on screen. The majority of the time, you're going to want to just specify it on screen. Your scale is a scale factor. Now, your block is drawn so big, so whatever it is, if it needs to be bigger or smaller, you can change the scale here in X, Y, and Z. In AutoCAD LT, you don't have the Z options. Now, you can specify the scale on screen if you'd like. You can put it in right here, or you can make them all uniform. But typically, you're going to only want to insert it at the scale of 1. That's going to put it in the exact same size that it was drawn at. Now, if you want to insert a block that's been drawn in inches, but you're working in feet or millimeters, that's okay. AutoCAD is smart. It knows that it needs to convert that, as long as you've given it the proper information. So as long as the block or the file you're inserting was set up with a proper block unit insertion setting, the chair was drawn in inches, and so it was set to inches. Our drawing here is set to inches, so everything's good. It's going to scale it with a factor of 1, meaning it's not going to scale it. Now, you can also rotate it if you want, and that's okay. So let's insert this block, and I'm going to just keep everything the way it is, except that I'm going to specify on the screen where I want the block to go. Now I click OK to insert, and now I can put my chair wherever I want. And there we go. It's that simple. Let's try it again. Insert, scale, uniform scale, and if you leave your scale on, meaning if you specify it on screen, then you'll have the options to do that. You pick your point, and then it will ask you your scale factor. Now, as I drag my mouse around, it scales up or down. I can type in 2, and it will insert it twice as big. Now we have a regular chair and a big chair. Now, it's a normal practice to use the coordinates of 0, 0 as a reference point for a lot of different things. Site plans, architectural drawings, surveys, etc. Inserting a title block and other items at 0, 0 is also a common practice, especially when you're working in paper space. And when you create your block, keep in mind that every block's insertion point is located at 0, 0 of that individual block. Also, once inserted, a block can be copied, moved, rotated, etc., just like any other object. Now let's see what would happen if our units were set differently. Right now we're set to inches. Let's set them to feet. Click OK. And we've inserted these already in inches, and they're 2 feet by 2 feet. This one is 4 feet by 4 feet. But now that AutoCAD thinks that our insertion units are in feet, what's going to happen? Let's insert the exact same block, and now we see the scale factor of 0.0833, or it's a factor of 12. Let's turn the specify on screen off for the scale. Click OK. There it is. Really tiny, because it thinks the 24 units here, 24 inches long, it's actually 24 feet. So it scaled it automatically. So if something comes in too big or too small, it happens. You can just scale it to the proper size that it needs to be once you insert it, or you can go back to the original file or block and fix the insertion units. You do that by going to Units, Enter, and picking on what they need to be. You do the same thing in the block file. Now, if you go to insert a block and you browse to it to find the block, we'll say Chair, Open, and our chair block is already here. If that's the case, then it will ask you this prompt. It will say, do you want to redefine the block, or you want to use the one that's already in your file? It's a very good question and a very important one to pay attention to and to understand what you're trying to do. Here's the case. If I redefine the block, then it's going to redraw all of the instances of my block in my file to match the new one that I'm inserting now. If I click Don't Refine Chair, then it's going to just insert a copy of the chair block that's already in my file. Now in this case, the line work is identical. But let's open it up, just like you would any other file, and let's change it. Just something simple. Use the stretch command, and let's make it very obvious that it's different. Click Save. Now here's a trick that you can use. If you hold down the Control and Tab key, it will toggle to another file that you have currently open. You can do that very quickly. So now I'm in my other drawing. Let's use the Insert command again. Browse to the chair file. This is what it's going to look like. It's my preview. Doesn't look like this. Click Open. Now click Insert, and let's redefine the block. See, the other 3 instances of my block were updated, and now I'm inserting the new version. Be careful with that because you can find blocks that have the same names, like chair. Chair is a very generic name for a block, so you probably don't want to call a block by the name of chair. Maybe you want to call it chair-square or chair-option 1, something like that, something that will define it for what it really is. That way you won't accidentally override your previously inserted chair blocks. Blocks can be used for several purposes. As we saw, creating a simple block is not that complicated at all. Editing them is also easy. Let's open up the annotation file for this chapter. Let's start by inserting a block. First, let's go to Model Space. That's where the line work belongs. Type the word Insert, or you know what? If it's on the ribbon, where do you think it would be at? Well, we're in the Home tab. Here's the block panel. Here's Insert. You can also create a block, open up the block editor, and edit different attributes in an attributed block, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Those are really cool. Those put in fields inside a block that you can edit. And each block has a field, and so you can put a different value in that field for every instance of the block. You can do a lot with those things. And here are some other things that you can use to edit them. We'll look at those later on. Click Insert. Now select the chair block. We already have one in this drawing, so we're going to use that. Click OK. Now let's place it in this room here. There you go. It's that simple. Blocks are used to create and change objects very quickly, especially line work that it's repeated, just like the line work for this chair. If you need a second type of chair, then you have to make a second chair block. The nice thing about having one chair style is that if I edit the chair block, and once I do edit that block, then every place where we inserted it, for example, it's already been inserted throughout this room, then all of those chairs will also be updated instantly. We don't have to go back to each chair and update it. That's why we use CAD. To do that on the drafting board, you'd have to erase all of the chairs and redraw each one individually, and that takes time. So to edit a block, you can do this a couple of different ways. Select it, and go up here in the ribbon and click on the block editor, or you can type in the word bedit for bedit, press Enter, and this will bring up a list of all of the blocks that are in your file. Find the one you want, select it, click OK. Now another method is to select the block, right-click, and pick the block editor. Or you can double-click the block, and it will bring up the block editor list, find the block you want, and it should highlight the block you've just double-clicked on, and click OK. That's the method I like to use because it's the quickest, and it requires the fewest amount of steps. So now you're in the block editor mode. And the block editor is a contextual ribbon tab that has all of your block editing tools. All of your other tools that you have, like drawing lines, circles, etc., are also available to you here in the block editor. Once you're done editing your block, you can pick on the Close Block Editor button. If you made changes to it, it'll ask you if you do want to save those changes or discard them. Say, no, you know what, I don't want to make any of these changes. I give up, I quit. I didn't really mean this. That's okay. Don't feel bad. But there are two main ways to edit a block. You can edit them through the block editor, as we just saw, or you can edit them in place. Either one will do the same thing, and it just depends on what you need. The block editor gives you lots of fancy buttons, as you saw, and puts all of your block editing options right there in front of you. But editing a block in place allows you to edit the block as it exists in your drawing. This gives you a different view or a different perspective. And if your block needs to relate or correspond to your other line work, but still remain a block all on its own, that's a good method to use. To get to that, select your block, right-click, and pick the Edit Block in Place. This starts what's called the Ref Edit or the Reference Edit command. Pick the chair, pick OK, and everything else is going to fade back. Now, I can't really pick these things and do anything to them, but I can draw lines and I can snap to them. Now, what I'm drawing now is going to be a part of the block, but this gives you the opportunity to, let's say I want to create a desk with the chair block, but I want to make sure that the chair fits against the wall properly. Start the line command, and I want to put it on this wall. And I can. Turn on my ortho command and close it. So now I have my chair, I have my desk, and I know that it fits properly against the wall here. All I have to do is come up here and hit Save Changes. And it says all of your changes are going to be saved. Click OK or Cancel if I want to keep going. And there you go. That's one block. Now, we edited the chair block. We added this table portion to it. What do you think is going to happen to the rest of the drawing? There you go. All of these other chairs now have tables as well. And that's okay. I can do something kind of cool here. If I select, right-click, and edit the block in place, see, it's only the one block all by itself now. So it kind of hides these things. This is kind of tricky, and it makes it kind of confusing because we really wanted those chairs to be there. But I can kind of see what's going on here. And I can use the stretch command to make my table a bit smaller. Then come up here to the Ref Edit panel on the ribbon. Click Save Changes. OK. And now all my tables are fixed. So now we've set up a room with tables and chairs, and we can make changes to it globally very quickly. That's the beauty of blocks. Now if we look at the block editor again, just double click on one of the blocks, pick chair, OK. This will open it up in the block editor. I can't see anything else but the line work for the block. It isolates it, but that's okay. Now, you have a lot of different options up here that we're not going to get to talk about, like the parametric constraints and the dimensional constraints and things like that. We will look at attributes and attribute definitions a little bit later on, and we will briefly look at some dynamic blocks. We'll give you an introduction to them, but they're very complicated and a little bit beyond the scope of what we're doing here in this video. However, they are very useful. The block editor opens and it puts you in this block editing state. And this is how the block's going to look when you insert it into the drawing. Now we can make changes to all the line work here that we want just the same way you would in a regular drawing mode. Now it allows you to edit this block without any other objects getting in the way, which is nice. We'll change the chair again. Let's get rid of our table, delete it. Let's put all of the line work here, not on the chair layer, but on layer 0, and make sure it's set to by layer. And there we go. Now we can also make some other changes to it here. We can give it rectangular arms instead of elliptical. Use the mirror command to erase that one. And now we have a little bit different chair. One thing that's really cool about the block editor is that you can test your block. If I click Test Block, it'll show me what it's going to look like in the drawing mode. If we made a dynamic block or an attributed block, this is very important because I can keep editing my block, but I can see how it's going to work. With static line work like this, it's really not a big deal. You know exactly what's going to happen. So when you're done testing your block, pick the Close Test Block window. AutoCAD will reset itself inside the block editor, and when you're all done, everything's great, you can close the block editor. Save the changes, and now our chair is saved. It's on the proper layer, it's on chair. You can test it out by changing one of the layers real quick. Just getting a preview, say, yes, it's working the way I want it to. Fantastic. So now you know how to edit a block, and you've found a couple of different ways on how to make those changes. Typically, you're going to want to use the block editor. But if you need to make changes to a block in reference to the surrounding line work, edit the block in place. Also, though, sometimes with the editing block in place, like with attributes, we'll look at those later on, it may be a little bit difficult to do that. So for static line drawings, just like this chair, with no moving parts or anything, editing it in place is fine, and editing it in the block editor is also just as fine.